What's up, guys? Welcome to Roensch Capital Charts. Today we're taking a look at Tesla stock, ticker symbol TSLA, on a variety of time frames in anticipation of the next trading day, Friday, May 24th. All right, guys, Tesla stock here today down $6.37 per share. That's minus 3.54% in regular trading hours. It's grinding a little bit higher here in the after hours. You guys know, typically what I'll say, and if you're new here, I'll explain briefly, is that in the after hours, volume is so low that we have to take it with a grain of salt. The only exception to that is when we see like a fundamental repricing on high volume, which is typically only going to be driven by something like an earnings event or a business-specific news release that occurs in the after hours. Either way, take it with a grain of salt, but it's not like it's up 20 points or anything. So either way, that's okay. Just take it with a grain of salt. Listen, let's get the best possible feel that we can for Tesla heading into tomorrow. We're going to take a look at the volume profile to pull out any bullish or bearish bias that we possibly can out of that. We'll take a look at the psychological levels. We'll look at implied volatility. We'll pull out the expected move for tomorrow and the directional bias coming out of the chain from calls or puts for tomorrow. So listen, let's get started here, and we'll start here on the 5-minute chart by taking a look under the hood at that volume profile, seeing, was there any bias that supports this downside move? Okay, first of all, by the way, if you're new here, guys, Tesla is a daily upload. I cover Tesla every single day. I appreciate you guys letting me know that that's something you want to continue to see in the comment section. That feedback helps out a lot. And, my goal here is 10,000 subscribers. We're getting very close. The channel's been growing, probably quicker than I anticipated. So subscribing just lets me know that you guys are appreciating the daily videos and to, continue hitting on Tesla. So look, let's take a look under the hood here and see what we can pull out. So we get this pretty aggressive sell-off in the morning. A little bit of a fade backside up, or back upside, I suppose. Consolidation, dump off, consolidation. So being that it's a 3.5% down day, what are we looking at in terms of context for the volume? Well, bears. Okay, for you guys to be happy with the volume profile, really I think what you would want to see is some pretty decent bearish bias existing in the profile, okay, to support the already 3.5% downside day, right? It already occurred, we know it occurred, but the volume profile is kind of hidden beneath the waves. You'd want to see that consistent with the movement. Whereas bulls, what are you looking for? Well, you can't really expect massive bullish bias, right? So ideally, you would just want to see really no bias, because then you don't have big bearish bias supporting the red day. So we get the open here. Volume quickly fades off, and it's not like we're seeing anything out of the ordinary with red candles compared to green candles. This is all relatively within context. So interestingly, on that first dump off, it's pretty contextual. There's nothing there that I can assign, out of context bias to, which is not a horrible thing if you're a bull. Now, moving through the day, we don't really get a lot of bullish bias on that bit of consolidation, fade back upside. What we do get here, this guy's here, we have to remain unbiased. Otherwise, what are we doing here? This is bearish bias. I would say on a scale of 0 to 100% bearish bias, I would put this here at maybe like a 40%. Okay, it's pretty clear, but it's certainly not 90. Okay, 90% would look something like, 8 consecutive bars of 1.5+ million shares each, and the green bars are still way down here. This to me is like a 40% bearish bias, so it's certainly there. Okay, and then as we move into the close, this here is very normal. That first bar after the close, that's a rebalancing bar, triggering high volume. I tend to ignore that. So that being said, let's move on to something arguably much simpler and very effective. That's going to be the psychological self-fulfilling prophecy levels, starting here on the very simple 30-minute chart with the white line, the 50 period, and the gray line, the 200 period. Here's what we're looking for. You guys remember yesterday that we were right between the 50 and the 200. Well, this morning we tested the 50 off the open, faded hard, ripping just below the 200 period. We tested it again to the upside. It was a little bit sloppy, bears. Okay, your rejection was a little sloppy. It wasn't incredibly clean, but ultimately you got the rejection and faded off into the close. Okay, bears, not bad work today on the 30-minute here in particular. Here's what you bears would want to see tomorrow, and then bulls, we'll talk about you guys. Bears, any retest of this 200 period, of course you'd want to see that reject, but here's what's likely to happen. It's not unlikely that we see this 50 period cross over the 200 tomorrow, And because, the stock moved downside, right? And this is bound to catch up. And that would make the 50 period the immediate level, right? Because it would be ahead of the 200 in terms of a back test. Whereas if you retest what in that case would be the 50, you would want to see that reject, because then you're starting to form that look on the 30 minute that you want, with the stock descending. Just above it is the 50 period descending, and just above that is the 200 period descending. That's kind of that look you guys want to see on across as many time frames as possible. Bulls, it would be that same look, just mirrored. So what does that mean for us bulls, right? Well, we would want to see it rip upside, ideally through both of these moving averages, reclaiming whichever one happens to be higher at the time as support, ideally starting to form that look with the stock beginning an uptrend, right? In the very short term here on the 30 minute, but starting to make kind of hinting at that uptrend with the 50 period right below it ascending. You can see the 50 period can change on the 30 minute day to day, and then the 200 period just below that. Ideally ripping through on high volume, retesting the higher level on low volume, and then bouncing on high volume. All right, now the 4-hour chart, if we take a look here, you can see today we gave up the 50 period on the 4-hour chart as well. This is very simple here. Okay, we're currently about 0.9% or so, 0.86% away from the 50 period on the 4-hour, and we're about 1.75% away from the 200 period on the 4-hour. Let's start with bears again. Any retest of the 50 period, you're going to want to reject. You don't want to reclaim that if you're a bear, but bears, the ultimate goal on the 4-hour specifically is really to get down through the 200 period and claim that as resistance. But understand that would likely take about a 2% downside day at least to make that happen. Bulls, any downside test of the 200 period, we don't want to give that up. Right now, that's kind of like a backstop, okay? But the goal is to reclaim that 50 period as support, which means a high volume rip, low volume test, high volume bounce. Very simple on the 4-hour here tomorrow. Now the daily. Guys, arguably the daily is not arguably, it is the most important chart basically every day, but especially here tomorrow. The 50-day moving average, which everybody and their mother is watching, is about 1.5% away to the downside, well within a single day's move potential on Tesla. Bulls, we don't want to give that up. If we give that up in a decisive manner, right, like the bears rip down through that, retest it, and reject hard, bears, that would be a big win for you guys. Bulls, that would be a little bit unfortunate, at least in the very short term. So bulls, how do we avoid that? Ideally just bouncing away from there, which is also happens to be the round number of about 170. It's in that region. If we test it, bounce. Ideally, we just move higher, reclaim 175, look up toward 180. All right, every $10 increment on Tesla is going to be a psychological level. We're always just looking to stair step in the correct direction, depending on how you're positioned, reclaiming each psychological level and technical level, which also tends to be a psychological level, the way that we look at it, which is the most popular ones that have the psychology around them because they have so many eyeballs. We're always just looking for that stair stepping trend, that stair-stepping mentality in our correct direction. Okay, so the daily is really, really basic tomorrow. Now, implied volatility, particularly important if you're trading options. Compared to the last week, it's high. Compared to the last month, we're kind of in the mid-range, honestly. And compared to the last 3 months, we're in the mid to low range. Okay, so understand that, how that sits contextually based on your intended trade time frame and how you plan to position yourself. IV is something you do not want to overlook if you're trading options. Expected move on Tesla here tomorrow. Thursdays are my day, because Thursdays are very, very simple, because there's no educated guesswork to be done, because we have an expiration tomorrow on Tesla. The expected move by tomorrow, Friday, May 24th, the close tomorrow, compared to today's close, is plus or minus $4.05 per share. That's the one standard deviation expected volatility currently being priced in by the traders on Tesla. Okay, so that's what to look for as the baseline volatility expectation. And however you disagree with that, if you agree with that, then maybe there's not a great position for you. If you disagree with that in either direction, that can actually be very helpful, because along with a directional bias, that could be a potential position for you. Now, you're probably thinking, okay, well, what about directional bias? Let's take a look at the volume. 1.62 million contracts traded here today on Tesla. 965,000 were calls, 653,000 were puts. So we are seeing a bullish bias on the overall call put ratio. And if we break that down by short-term speculators in that 0 to 20 delta range, right? We get 452,000 calls and about 213,000 puts. Pretty heavy bullish bias out of the short-term speculators in particular. Guys, if you're getting value out of the daily Tesla videos, please, the best thing you can do to help the channel grow is just leave a like on the video. It's free, it takes half a second, and it helps out tremendously. Seriously, you have no idea. I greatly appreciate it, and I'll see you in the next one.